Welcome to DIY with Uncle Kyle. Hope you're ready to learn something new today. What is up, natties? Uncle Kyle coming back at you with another DIY video. We're doing part 2 of the leather pouch. So, I did my behind the scenes work that I was talking about. And this is how the gray turned out with the vinegaroon. How cool is that? Admittedly, I think there's a little saddle soap for me washing it down in that, but bang. And I believe this will lighten up a little bit over time. So I know it's kind of dark. If you're an Anaheim Angels fan, you're like, ooh, that's too dark of a gray. I think it will lighten up and it'll pop when I put some of the conditioner on it. I'll do one piece. So we have our leather dyed and washed. So now we're going to get ready to do some assembly. So we are going to sew a couple pieces. We're going to do some gluing. Oh, also, you remember the vinegaroon, how that was clear? And there was that steel wool in the vinegar. Look at that now. Look at how noxious that is. I think I'm just going to have to throw this away because I don't think it would be good for anything else. But it's cool to know that it worked. It did work. That's how I got the nice gray color going. So I will dispose of that later. But anyways, as I was telling you in the last video, the edges of these pockets, we roll them. So you see how I folded that over? Typically, after I wash them, when it's wet, I will score the leather a little bit on the back and then fold it over. I'll use a cobbler's hammer, which looks like this. You don't want to hit hard things with these hammers. You might be able to see a couple of them on the little tool rack back there, but it damages the head, and then whatever damage it has on the head then transfers to the leather. Not good. This is meant for hammering soft leather only. But yeah, so I fold the edge over, and then we will stitch groove this. We'll put a little contact cement in here, or I think it's called Tanner's Bond. It is contact cement. Contact cement, Tanner's Bond. Yeah. And I'm not going to do everything in this video. Like, we will jump to the next segment of getting the main parts sewed together, putting on hardware. Today, you're going to see me do the buckle for this. So before we glue these two pieces together, boom. First, I have to open this hole up a little more. So we have dies, and I will take a picture of it and put it into the video. We have dies and a big clicker that goes and cuts out the leather. And that's how we make these pieces. We used to cut them out by hand, which is very time consuming, and you just don't get uniform stuff. We used to have to sand the edges to get an even edge, and it just adds more work. So that's just another piece of equipment that you haven't seen that isn't in the rest of this room. And then also, I have another camera angle over here. I'm going to show you guys the Skyver since we talked about that in the last video, and you can see that in action. Away we go. I hope you guys enjoyed the first part. It was a lot of fun editing it. We're doing the 2 camera angles now, so I can get used to doing that as well. And I can assist the man, Sweet Derek, with his duties. So I showed you the picture in the last video. This has a fence back here. You can adjust this. And then this wheel down here has a sharp edge, and there's a stone in there that is constantly maintaining that edge. You run the leather through it, and there's this wheel that applies pressure and turns to push the leather through, and it thins it out. When it's done, it'll look, these are just some test pieces. It'll look like this. You'll notice there's this recessed area on the outside. And typically when we do this is on the ones where I cover them with fabric, and it just gives us more room on the back for me to fold the fabric into it, get a nice clean edge. And perhaps in the next video, or actually, you know what? Hold on. I'll see you in the other camera. So right here, you see on that edge, the back of this is not covered in fabric, but the front is. So what we did is we thinned out that edge on this front piece that's covered, so I could fold the fabric in between the two of these and sandwich it, and it just has a nice finish like that. You really don't want to be super abusive to these ones. I've made many of them with the fabric on it. You got to kind of take care of this. This pouch I'm doing now is for a brand new journeyman, and I'm not doing any fabric on it. I'm just doing the dye, and then obviously the really awesome tooling that Dad did. Look at how sick that is. So cool. So I'm just gonna do a couple little passes here. Woo! Oh, don't go down. Don't go down now. I'm just gonna do a couple passes so you guys can see how the machine works, and that's pretty much it. The splitter isn't really worth showing you. Oh my goodness, English isn't worth me showing you. And we really only use that for one specific piece. I'll show that to you after we do this. So, power on. And then this is controlled by a foot pedal. You can't, I think it's out of camera view, but you see boom. And it has a throttle. This and that sewing machine right there operate the same way, and that it's much like a car. You control it like a throttle. You can like whee, or you can do it a little slower. I usually just go for it on this. It doesn't benefit you to run it at a slow speed because it can cause issues. So here we go. I'll do alongside. I'll do all of this, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Here we go. Ooh, you know what? This might be, that might be a little too low for this piece. This piece is much thicker than the ones I had to do previously, so we'll see what happens here. So, as you can see, that's a pretty thick piece that I trimmed there. And if you were watching, this fence moved because I put too much force on it. So when you're doing this, if you really got to thin something out pretty heavily, it cut it very clean, you can see. But if you need to thin something out a little more heavily, it might be better to do an initial pass, just cutting a little bit, and then turn it down a little deeper and do it again. But yeah, that is the skiving machine. And now I'm going to move this camera to set it up to do the sewing machine. So I'll do a little jump cut into the other camera. See you over there. And just like that, we're back. So I've got the other camera set up so we can record some sewing, but first I'll just kind of get a couple of these, if I can stop messing with the microphone, a couple of these little basic steps done that we need to do. So if you see this workspace, this is just granite countertop. This is pieces of granite that we picked up. And the reason we use granite is because it's hard and you can strike on it. So when you are setting rivets or doing anything that requires a little tapping, when he does his tooling, he's tap, 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 tap. So we do it over there. This is essentially a cutting board. So if you're gonna cut any leather, that's the spot. Pretty straightforward, am I right? So what we do is we take our clip, boom, we run that through the back of the piece. If you got to give it a little shove, it's okay. And then you'll see that I guess I maybe should have trimmed it the other way, but I opened that up a bit for that bump to give it some space. But I kind of boogered it. Sometimes when we make these, you get kind of a unique one, but you know, to err is to be human, am I right? So you push the rivet together, and then there is this tool that you use to strike it, and it has a concaved head. So you stick that on this round part, on this rivet, boom, and then you strike it in place. Now, when you're doing this, you don't want to like tap, 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 tap. You want to give it one good pop, bang, and you're done. You don't want to fuss around. You want to get it done. Okay, here we go. And one more for good measure. Sometimes, so you'll see the back of the rivet smashed down, boom, secured the clip in there, bam. Sometimes when you double strike it, the head of the rivet will get deformed, And usually if that ever happens, I'll just pull it out and put another one in because I don't want somebody having a goofy looking rivet. We try to keep them nice. So, let me make sure the camera can see me. So, now we take our Tanner's Bond that I already showed you. And this is just kind of a thick glue. It's funny because, you know, my dad is very handy. We've always done projects. I knew what contact cement was from a very early age. I know that isn't anything to like hold a deep sense of pride in, but also I just think it's kind of funny. My dad's a handy guy. I am very thankful to know the amount of stuff that I do and to have been able to learn as much as I have from him and still do to this day. My dad is the coolest, like I said, and he still takes pride in maintaining his home and doing work and doing little projects. He likes it. And it makes me happy. He's always tinkering. But it's for a cause. So this takes a little bit of time. Typically what I do is I put a relatively generous layer on these back pieces because they're going to get glued together, and then you got to let it sit for a little bit. Let the glue tack up. You can use the clamps, but at this point, oh my goodness, itchy nose. You can use the clamps, but at this point, if you clamp it too hard, it indents the leather. And then you got to kind of massage that out. So it's not something I really like to have to deal with. So if you'll notice this little anvil right here, I'm just going to set that on top and let weight do the job. And then I will sew the top of this really quick and just lock in the top part to the other half. The bottom part doesn't get sewn until the whole pouch is being assembled, which you will see probably in the next video. But to the point I was trying to make in the last video, these are very time consuming. We have put a lot of money into the equipment and such, but even then still, you have to know the techniques and know what you're doing. It is a labor of love, but it's really cool. Lately, I've been getting a lot of, ooh, good Lord, I need to turn the fan on. I'm getting a little warm. Get a little fan action going. I've been getting some really challenging but very cool requests. One apprentice hit me up, and I'm not going to name drop people. I kind of did last episode, but I'm going to try to avoid doing that. But he wants a pouch that looks like Spartan armor from the video game Halo, which I think is cool. He doesn't want any fabric on it either, so I'm essentially going to be doing like a custom theme build. And if I ever start selling these on the internet, I am more than likely going to charge a pretty penny for the ultra custom ones, but I will warranty it because I think that's only fair. And I will also take a very reasonable amount of time, take my time and make sure it's just top notch, you know. We always aim for that, but it's like, man, I keep hitting my microphone. But it's tough because the materials and stuff we use to make these, it costs money. This is a very expensive hobby. Like, we charge $200 for journeymen. I make them for the apprentices who ask for $100. Usually if I work with an apprentice, I just make them one because you know, it's just kind of like another one of my little gifts to them as one of their mentors, essentially. I have to say, I am not beloved by all apprentices. I did have a couple that unfortunately I just did not get along with, but I did try. All I can do is try, but you know, construction is very dangerous, and if you're not paying attention or you have a bad attitude and you're going to get upset about small things and be holding a grudge all day, you know, for me, and I'm sure that any construction worker that watches this will agree. For me, you don't have to like everybody you work with, but when you're on a job, your life could depend on people near you, people you don't even know their names. I have seen close calls, and I have seen brotherhoods forged when somebody has a very, very close call right near, very close call. It does happen. But that's why you got to be careful. You got to take care of yourself. You got to protect yourself. You got to be paying attention. But yep, it's pretty cool. It is kind of overwhelming because I will be honest with you. I got a lot on my plate, and it sucks because I know what it's like to order something custom and be so excited to have it. And through doing this, I kind of gained an understanding that, like, you know, these things take time. And even though I've never really had anybody get upset with me over the amount of time it took, I will say there have been people that have asked me to make them one, and it just took me a while to get back to them, and I hit them back up, and they just ignored me, which is like, okay, like, I'm sorry. But it's like, also, I have a life and I have a lot going on, but I still do like doing these because I want to maintain the tradition. I'm getting a little crazy with the glue. Fortunately, that is a part that is not exposed. But you do really got to use a little care. Unfortunately, I am being a little messy this evening. You'll have to forgive me. So, you just saw me glue those. I will stitch groove them real quick. This one, it's had a little dry time. Boom. And I just match up the edges. I'll usually go top to bottom. And you see, because I let that dry a little bit, it tacked up. Now you can pull it apart and kind of realign things, but you really want to try to go from one end to the other. And also, if they don't match perfectly, especially on ones like this where one side isn't getting the fabric, I will go put it on the belt sander and even it out. Burnish the edge, and then reapply a little dye to the edge. We used to paint the edges, but I found that the paint is just not durable. It would chip or peel, and it didn't look good, and oops. Admittedly, a lot of the early pouches were experiments, but anybody that's brought me one of the older ones wants a new one, I usually give them a discount because I like to keep the old ones so I can show the progression of us making these. It's cool to me. So we'll let that sit for a little bit, and we will get these sewed up. So this is a stitch groover. So this silver part is a guide. This brass part is kind of the body of it. You can adjust this in and out, and then that's a little cutting head. And you can change those out for different sizes. We pretty much have the appropriate size for the thread that we're using on the sewing machine. So boom, we're already set up. We try to keep the tools in the condition they need to be to make one of these pouches. We do special projects sometimes. Things get changed around a bit. That's why you always want to check your gear before you start doing anything. So with these, let me adjust that a little bit. We're going down. So these ends will get cut a little bit so they can get folded for the screwdriver. So I don't need to stitch all clear out to the edge. We usually go about 3/4 of an inch in, since some of that's going to be cut, and that way our threads doesn't get cut. Once you sew something, you don't, clearly if you've wore clothing, you know that this to be true. You don't want to cut the stitch because then it might unravel the whole thing. I have had to repair pouches in the past. Oh, wow, that is so cool. That vinegaroon really penetrated into the leather, because usually there's a lighter color of the dye, or it is just like straight leather color underneath the stitch groove. But this one, it looks like it penetrated pretty good. So you can see that little line that I made, and it's still the color that we dyed it. Pretty cool. And then you hit the back side too. The whole purpose of this is so the stitch can bite into the leather and it's not sticking out. It's not, the stitch isn't exposed to potentially get rubbed and then fray. It protects it a little bit and it just makes a more solid bond. So I'm gonna jump on the sewing machine and sew this up and you guys can check that out. Alrighty, here we are. I gotta kind of get in to get in, if you know what I mean. So this is our sewing machine. When you go, this dictates the direction in which you're sewing. It says R and F, reverse, forward, boom. When you start your stitch, we will typically run it inside to the end and then back. It kind of locks in the ends of the threads. And then we have this tool called a thread zappet. And it has a little heating element. You hold a button and you can get the excess thread off and kind of melt them and clean them up. Because this is, I think this is a synthetic thread. So this lever raises the sewing assembly up. And typically what I do is I like to make sure the meat of the project is on the inside. And you also need to make sure that these threads are long enough because the machine takes some of them back when it starts the initial sewing. And if the thread jumps the needle, it is frustrating. So typically what I do is I will leave the sewing assembly up and I will work the needle down into the leather. Now this part I kind of guesstimate. I've done many of these, so I'm pretty good at landing at a spot where I can do 3 or 4 stitches and then start running the rest of the piece. So we're gonna do our reverse first. Oops, I did it the wrong way. Oopsie poopsie. And I don't ever, hopefully I'm not having technical issues. I don't really ever run this machine at a high speed because I don't need to. This thing is making some crazy noises right now and I don't love it. Because honestly, if you whiskey throttle this thing, you'll probably end up sewing out of the stitch groove. I have not done an absolutely perfect job on this piece, which is slightly disappointing, but as I said before, sometimes the mistakes are what make them unique. And typically, I will also admit, when I have some where I think there are some defects or some parts that I could have done better, I will typically show it to the customer and tell them, you know, I can either remake the pouch or I'll give it to you at a discounted rate. And most of them are fine with the discount. So we get our little thread zapper here. Goodbye. And then I'll usually just melt that end down into itself there and it dries pretty quickly. Oh yeah, okay. So here, unfortunately, sometimes when you run it back and forth, the stitches get hung up on one another and kind of do some wild stuff. Okay, so we're back. That's sewn. Like I was saying over there, you'll notice I ran out of the stitch groove a little bit right there. Unfortunate, I don't want to punch more holes in it, but the beauty of that is this folds around and it's on a radius, so you can't really tell when the pouch is finally assembled. Okay, so we got some sewing done. We did some gluing. I'm gonna get these pieces sewn up. And then the next time, we will probably start doing final assembly, and then we have to start putting in hardware. I have to punch these 2 holes, and it'll have some silver screws in it. Those ones are more decorative, but the rest of the pouch, this part, when the loops are folded in or everything. There are screws up here that go through the whole piece and really hold it together. The stitches hold it together, but the screws are just an additional piece of hardware to keep everything together. Yeah, so this has ended up being a little longer than I wanted to, but I hope you guys enjoy this. If you like this, go down in the comments. Tell me what you liked about it. Tell me what you didn't like about it. Ask me questions. I will answer questions to you guys while I'm doing these. I'm trying to make this fun little add-on to the podcast. And I also, as I said earlier, I want to do things that might be helpful. If you want to be taught how to do something in specific, I could do that. Anyways, I'll do some more background work. We'll be ready to go for the next video. We'll see you on the next one.